My name's Marcus Braybrooke, and I live in England, and I've been a parish priest for something like 55 years. That gives you, it gives my age away, doesn't it? But from very early on, I've had a particular interest in the relation between people of other faiths. After university, I was able to spend a year at Madras Christian College in Chennai, learning about the different religions. And what I think I there discovered, the wealth of messages about God's love in other traditions. So I've never felt exclusive. Indeed, what I've tried to do is encourage people of different faiths to understand the oneness which underlies it. But that is also a very life-changing event, I think, really, was at the college, some of us as students would go and help at the leprosy clinic. And I must say, the first time I went, I was really very worried about it. And I remember one day where we went with one of my colleagues who was a fellow student who was a Muslim, another who was Roman Catholic. And there the doctor was wearing very traditional sort of Hindu clothes. And somehow, as we washed the children's feet and their joy and the sort of general happiness, but this really came to me that sense, surely people of all faiths could come together to try and heal the world. But it's not as easy as that, I know. But because first of all, there was so much suspicion and rivalry between different religions. And, a lot of sort of Christians, even now, are sort of exclusive, that it's the only way to heaven. And so a lot of the work has been both in arranging meetings, because I think if you meet and become friends with people of another faith, that is transforming. But also my writing has been partly to encourage people to learn about other religions, but also in the books of prayer and so on, to show that there is an underlying spirituality. But as I say, beyond this, the purpose is always to share in the healing of the world, and of course, which the environment at the moment is one of the critical issues. I've been a Christian priest now for something like 50 years. So in my life and what I say and do, I hope in one sense to be a follower and disciple of Jesus. But I've become very aware by making friendship with people of other faiths and working with them, that God's love is not confined to one particular religion, but that God communicates through the different religions. And because of that sense of God's universal love, what I've tried to do in different ways is to help people of different faiths and countries and cultures to come together, to appreciate each other's both differences and what we share, but above all, try to work together for a better humanity. There's so many issues and they seem to be all related, but particular concern is about the need for forgiveness and the difficulty of it, because it seems to me most communities have been hurt by one or another and all sorts of pain, that we've got to somehow forgive, and because that will heal. And I find sometimes, although the causes I agree with about anti-racism and so on, sometimes it seems to me too strident. And in one sense, real healing is where people can overcome their bitterness rather than be just sort of somehow defeated. So, and this is partly because I've done particular concern for Christian-Jewish relations and was director for a time of the Council of Christians and Jews. And of course, inevitably, almost every day when I was doing it, one was thinking about the Holocaust and the depth of human evil, but also of courage, and how one begins to heal that. And of course, the other genocides and so on. So it underlies all this is the belief that the love of God is stronger than this. And I just mentioned one occasion. It's when I visited Hiroshima, whichever people call it, and I was shown round by a Buddhist who at the time the bomb was dropped, was a child of 6. And she talked to me as we walked around the Peace Park about the horrific day, her memory of it, the clear blue sky, and then the absolute chaos, going home and there was no home, looking for her parents and there were no parents. And then she talked about the operations and so on she'd had, always without any bitterness and total acceptance. And then at the end, we were at one of the memorials there, peace memorials. And I think we both felt that, I was sad about all the British involvement. She was sad about all the what prisoners of war suffered and so on. And somehow we both felt that peace, which passes all understanding, that there is that reality. And that is what, I hope in what little way we can, by coming together, we can make more real in our world. The climate issue relates to so many issues. They seem to be bound together. I mean, conflict and war produces desolation and deforestation and so on. In a matter of Africa, Ethiopia and that area, it is because of conflict. The soil has eroded, trees have been cut down. So there's that area of conflict. The whole need for better methods of agriculture, but also a whole new philosophy which respects all life, that the natural world isn't there just to be exploited, but to be valued and treasured. And I'm aware that particularly in the past, Christian teaching has often sort of suggested that humanity was their master of all creation, whereas I see that we're the servant of all creation. And this, I think more and more, I'm aware just of the beauty and the value of all life. And very particularly during this coronavirus, we've been having walks and it's nature. And I keep noticing the very tiny insects and thinking they have a life too. And what does that all mean? And the tiniest flowers, and somehow the sense that every little bit of life is precious in God's creation. So I think what I would want people to encourage the spirituality, which underlies a real reverence for the earth. And then we've got to look at the practicalities, and one of which seems to be the enormous number of people whose lives in refugee camps and other wasted lives. And somehow their talent we should be able to use. I mean, who are the sort of lost Beethovens and others in these refugee camps? We've got to work towards a world in which we recognize each person's life is equally important, which seemed to me then a sort of radical redistribution of wealth. And I'm interested in this sort of basic wage some countries now are paying to everybody. So however poor they are, they've got something to live on without having to sort of go and wait in the streets and beg in the streets. But then I also feel it links to the desperate need for change of the United Nations. And somehow we've got to have a way in which the nations really work together rather than the competition. And I find, and there's been a long sort of effort to try and get more spiritual impact into the input into the United Nations. But the Security Council, that seems to be again the way it operates. It discriminates against large numbers of the smaller countries. So it's very sort of holistic, so many issues. And I was interested earlier this year, a conference in Singapore, when King Abdullah of Jordan was the key speaker. And he actually said the most important issue is the interfaith issue. People of faiths and different races can overcome their divisions, because until we can get away from those divisions, we can't share the necessary energy to tackle the issues of climate change and the poverty which results from it. And we've also got to learn, as I said earlier on, that all life is precious and have a greater sense of our oneness with all beings. And certainly I've been very much sort of inspired by some of the Jain and sort of teaching me. And so I suppose we try to practice it in the little ways. I mean, there's a big picture. I mean, each of us has to try and see what little things we can do. I mean, we had solar panels for quite a long time, some compost. I tried to be vegetarian, but then I realised if I was sort of begging on the streets of London, I probably would eat anything with that was there. So it's that sort of balance we've got, but all the time to consider what we are using and trying to make sure we're putting enough back so that we leave us a gentle footprint of the earth. There's so many changes which are necessary. I think very much is obviously now is to enable young people to have whatever experience they can, both of the natural world and awareness of what is happening to it, but also experience of living together with people of other traditions and other faiths. And I mean, I know for my own self, but the year in India, I lived in the Indian student accommodation. And I was obviously the only white person, so that was one thing. And learning to adapt. But we need, because it's those sorts of experiences, when you make friends, people of other colours, other traditions, you actually begin to realise we all have our own particularity, which we accept, but each other person is equally valuable. So as much as we can do about young people, and which is one of the things the Free Faiths Forum, Faith and Belief Forum, I've been working with. We have lots of programs for young people to share with each other and to work together on a project. And then I would like us to really tackle the enormous issue of an ever-growing number of people in refugee camps, the homeless and the hungry, whose lives are just being wasted, and they probably have so much to give. Obviously, very critical is the climate issue and the effect it's having on the Arctic and the Antarctic. And one of our granddaughters involved in sort of filming in that whole area and being to sort of the distant side of Russia and telling us from her own experience of how the ice and so on is melting. How wealth is distributed. And and of course, we need to continue to put pressure on our governments, really have forward-looking policies to look forward to what the world needs to be like, say, in 20 years, rather than how we cope with the next election. And of course, David Attenborough is one of our great examples, and you know, he was quite pessimistic about the future. I suppose I'm more encouraged by Jane Goodall, who has that hope that in the end, life will move forward. And I've been very interested to say Father Barry and some of his writings about that sense of the earth, the whole evolution is moving forward, and we have our share in shaping the future. May your love, O Lord, flow out from our hearts to bring forgiveness, healing and hope to our weary world.